Hi, I'm Connor. As a lot of people are, I'm constantly on the hunt for new games that might pique my interest. While some sources can help with that, I find that a lot of sources often recommend the same couple of indie games, so today I plan to show you a couple that you probably haven't heard of or played. I know I've been showing some games weekly in my short series, but these are all ones that I have not talked about yet. Sorry if it sounds sick, and for the unusual delay between this and the last video. Let's get into it. First up is a compelling first-person puzzle game, Superliminal. This game was released in late 2020 and was developed by Pillow Castle. Superliminal is best experienced as blind as possible, so I'll try and keep this one brief and not show any super far sections of the game. There's so much to love about this one. The whole premise surrounds the idea of how changing your perspective can affect how you solve puzzles, which is pretty much the main mechanic as well. Each level puts a super unique spin on ideas to create a dreamlike and very surreal experience. Though a lot of your time will start in an all too familiar hotel-like building, the further you get through the game, the more deformed and incomprehensible the levels become. Despite this, the more you traverse through the world, the more its absurd rules make sense to you. You'll be guided through this messed up series of levels by a man whose name will become all too familiar to you.
Hello, my name is Dr. Glenn Pierce.
Dr. Glenn Pierce, the lead scientist on the sleep experiment that your character is a part of. He'll occasionally interject to give you some guidance or general words of wisdom that can actually be very entertaining and never quite overstay their welcome. Although the game is decidedly cerebral from start to finish, it does have a lot of funny moments. It also does an amazing job at subverting your expectations through both its dialogue and increasingly wacky puzzles. There are many moments in this game that will puzzle you to no end your first time through, but rather than making you feel stupid once you actually finish them, like most puzzle games do, it really just baffles you by how the game mechanically even pulls it off. The use of perspective is not necessarily a new thing for puzzle games or video games in general, but the way it's used here is so creative, so intuitive, so insanely impressive that I can't help but be blown away by how this game even got made. However, I am just a stupid little gamer though, so what do I know? Superliminal is absolutely full of surprises, and I can hands down tell you that this is probably my favorite puzzle game ever made. You can find Superliminal on Steam and I believe all the big consoles for about $20. On Steam, at the very least, it is on sale quite frequently, but I can promise you that it is well worth the full price and more, so if you've got some free time, Superliminal is well worth it. Next up is Ion Fury, developed by Void Point LLC and published by 3D Realms. Full disclosure, I was sent this game and its new DLC for free by the developer, which was very nice of them, but I'm not sponsored or anything like that, so I wasn't required to say good things about the game, or even put the game in a video. However, I am pleased to say that Ion Fury is actually really good. I have a lot of experience with retro FPS games, also sometimes referred to as boomer shooters. In fact, I actually have a whole video about them that you should totally go watch if you haven't already. This one I would say is most similar to Quake if you're familiar with it, and that's mainly because you're going to be focusing a lot on moving really fast while also trying to maintain some of your aiming ability. One thing I really liked about this game was just the general vibe. A lot of the environment is sort of like a futuristic city, which pairs really well with the electronic and sort of synth OST that the devs have put together. The levels are filled with detail, both visually and gameplay-wise. There's a ton of interaction with the world as well, which I love in games, so that was a big plus. For example, you can access security cameras from computers around levels. If you use the interact key on electrical outlets, it actually shocks you, which I found out by accident, and you can even use your stun baton to shock generators and electricity panels to power them, which the objective of levels will sometimes revolve around. All the weapons are also extremely fun, from the pistol to the shotgun, all the way to the bowling bomb, and so many more weapons, which I'm not going to spoil for you. I don't usually consider this type of thing important enough to mention, but one of my favorite inclusions in the game is the pistol, which has an alternate fire, which acts sort of like a high noon from Overwatch, where you can lock on to enemies, and then it'll fan the hammer at them, and just like, yeah, you get the idea. I showed it on the screen, It's just a lot of fun. All the enemies have very good designs as well. My favorite personally are these little skulls with spider legs. They're freaky, but I love their design. Like most of the enemies in the game and the world in general, there's just a lot of detail put into them. Like most retro FPS, you can expect a ton of secrets in just about every single level. This can be anything from portable medkits to weapons you're not supposed to have yet and other wacky stuff like that. I do have yet to play the DLC, but the base game is really good, so yeah, check this one out on Steam for $24.99. Next up is a title that was put on Steam fairly recently, Bleak Sword DX. Developed by More 8-Bit and published by Devolver Digital, I've been having a lot of fun with this Souls-like dungeon crawler. First off, the visual design is absolutely gorgeous. From my understanding, I think this used to be a mobile game, which is part of the reason its controls and levels are fairly simplistic. However, that is not at all a bad thing. The simple visuals work really well with the vibrant colors you'll find in most stages of the game, and it also makes it easy to discern enemies from the environment, which can be important when there are several trying to attack you at once. There are a bunch of regions in the game as well, and at the end of each you'll encounter a boss that is themed around the stage that you just conquered. As I said earlier, this game is very simplistic in a lot of its elements, like combat, which has just a couple of buttons. You can pretty much roll, attack, and block, but it's how you use them that allows for some gameplay expression. For example, if you attack just after a dodge, you can perform this sort of slam attack that does major damage if you hit it, but if you miss, it leaves you very open to being attacked. You're also able to parry and counterattack as well. By completing stages, you'll gain experience and occasionally items. Upon dying though, you will lose all your XP towards the next level along with your items. However, after dying, you are able to retry the stage immediately after. Unfortunately, you won't have those items or the XP, but if you do beat it, you move on to the next stage along with all the items and XP that you lost before. Probably one of my favorite elements of the game is the sheer amount of enemy variety in it. Each region introduces a bunch of different ones, with each set of new enemies becoming increasingly more horrific and dangerous. Considering the bosses are often themed around the regions, they will often be tied into the lore for smaller fodder enemies as well as the environment of the stage that they reside in. In addition to the main game, there's also a gladiator arena style mode and a boss rush mode that you unlock by playing through the game, both of which are very enjoyable. There's a bunch of stuff in this game that isn't really a necessary addition, but it does add a lot to the world, like the bestiary, which gives little piece of information about all the mobs and bosses. In addition to this though, there are just a lot of small additions and details that add a lot to the whole game and really brings the experience together. Overall, Bleak Sword DX is a pretty chill experience, even at times where it can be a little difficult. You can find Bleak Sword on PC and Switch for $9.99. This one is really strange. The Stoevi Curse is a horror farming game, which, if you ask me, there are not enough of. This takes place in a rural, post-communist Bulgaria in which you play as Dino Stoev. Your goal, to put it simply, is to maintain your farm and protect your children, Joanne and Anna. The actual gameplay works on a day system, so you'll get dropped into the farm where you're tasked with harvesting a certain amount of crops. Early on, this is pretty simple. You explore, plant seeds, water your crops, fertilize if you want, and that's about it. There's some cathartic jazz music in the background, and it's kind of nice. As the days progress, you'll notice a large beast become more present on the farm. You may struggle initially with him, but it isn't too difficult to avoid as long as you're paying attention, at least at the beginning. You'll need to learn how to perform your farming duties around him as you have no real tool that you can use to fight him. As the day progresses, it'll get darker, which can be very stressful, especially if you run out of flashlight battery. You'll have to make it back to the gate upon completing the objective, which signifies the end of the day. From here, you'll have a couple of things that you can buy: more seeds, fertilizer, or batteries. You'll have to manage the money you get from harvesting crops in order to prepare yourself the best way possible. The game also gives the option to stay and farm beyond the objective, which introduces some risk and reward if you want to stay and earn a bit more money. In the shop each day, you're also treated to some dialogue between Dino and the shopkeeper, which progresses the story using its historical context of the post-communist Bulgaria really effectively. You'll also get some dialogue after the shop between Dino and his children, learning more about their relationships and, again, the world. It's a very simple storytelling method, but it gets the job done very well. Overall, the Stoevi Curse is a simple, albeit really enjoyable experience with a pretty interesting story. It also happens to be entirely free on Steam and not super long, so check it out. Next up is a game that I've played a couple of times over the last few years, The Looker. The Looker is a fairly short puzzle game with a system of puzzles initially straightforward that evolves into more creative and complex puzzles the deeper that you go. It is also worth mentioning that it's a parody of the sometimes pretentious 2016 puzzle game The Witness, which would make this the second time I've brought up a parody of that game in a video. Despite the whole game more or less being one big bit, with the entire thing culminating into a really stupid, albeit effective joke, it's actually really good. The entire game just has a really reassuring sense of humor. There are these little voice logs all over the map that pretty much just ramble on about completely random subjects. For example, there's a chessboard with a voice log next to it, and upon activating the log, the narrator pretty much just spews nonsense about chess for a minute or two. For the most part, it's very lighthearted from start to finish. I have not personally played all the way through The Witness, but I am very familiar with a lot of the gameplay sections in it, and I can pretty confidently say that this mainly draws from its visual style and method of storytelling. The Looker also has a lot of think outside the box puzzles, but in some different ways to its source material. The main puzzle solving tool is by drawing a line from the start indicator to the end indicator of the puzzle, with some other mechanics being thrown into the mix towards the end. One of my favorite and least favorite variations of this format is a little arcade box that requires you to play a form of snake to progress. This part is frustrating, but it is more than effective, and it's not even close to the most interesting nor the most enjoyable puzzle in the game, but I'm throwing it in here to give you a little taste of the weird shit that you'll be seeing. The biggest strength I would say this game has is that it's a much smaller amount of time to fill than its source material, The Witness, meaning that it doesn't require a billion variations on this format just like The Witness does, because The Witness is a much longer game. It doesn't ask that you have a very long attention span, which is nice. You can literally finish The Looker in like an hour. This is a very accessible and fun puzzle game. It's completely free, it's short, and it'll have some moments that actually make you use your brain. I can pretty much guarantee that you'll enjoy it, and it'll give you a genuine, well-deserved chuckle at a couple of points. That should pretty much do it for today's video. Again, I'm sorry if I sounded sick. I'm still coming down from something, and I know I said at the beginning, but again, I'm really sorry for the unusual delay between this video and my last. Life stuff happens, and then I got sick, and it was a mess. It was a whole thing, but hopefully we'll be back on track from this point forward. If you did like the video and you'd like to support me, the best way to do so as of right now is to like the video and comment something, anything down below. Maybe even subscribe if you're feeling a bit generous. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.